Hey, this is the World Advice Channel too. What I want to talk about today is a topic of, do humans suck? So when it comes to this particular topic, do humans suck? For this video, I will explain in a simple and straightforward way the answer to that question so people, even those unfamiliar with the topic, can understand it. So now I mention that, let's get started. So when it comes to the topic of do humans suck, like the term you hear all the time, humans suck, because we ruin everything, whether it could be for nature, the environment, socially, politically, economically, just in general, humans were predisposed to screw everything up, yada, yada, yada. The truth of the matter is, do humans actually suck, for that matter? Okay, like, do we all suck? The simple answer to that question, simply put it, is no. I do not believe we do suck. Because the first main reason why I do not believe human beings suck is simply down to the fact that you cannot loop everybody together in a category based on the actions of whether a small percentage or even a majority. Because you can't loop everybody together based on that, okay? That is the truth of the matter. Because when you look at the world in general as a whole, okay, the truth of the matter of this whole idea that human beings suck and we all suck and this and that, the truth of the matter is that is not actually correct. Because to actually say humans suck, it would mean you literally mean everybody in the world sucks. Which is definitely far from the truth, okay? Because when it comes to that topic, humans suck, it's always the idea that we ruin everything. Whether it could be we ruin things for nature, we are not able to come up with decisive ideas when it comes to how to run the world. Like, for example, politically, which is why we have so much tension and drama. Like, we just screw everything up for that matter, okay? But the truth of the matter is, that is not true at all for that matter, okay? Because there's a lot of people who do behave themselves, whether it could be on a ground to ground basis. They don't go around, like, for example, if you work in customer service, everyone who works in customer service says, oh God, I fucking hate people. But there's a lot of people out there who, when they deal with when they go to customer service, they don't cause problems. They actually know what they want. They're not like a lot of people, especially North America, specifically referring to Canada and America, where they just wander everywhere and they're like, I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. They actually have an idea of what they want to do. They actually have good hygiene. They sneeze in their arm, they cough in their arm. They don't just sneeze in their hand and cough in their hand and just touch every and anything. They don't start fights or abuse with people, all that type of shit. Okay, there's a lot of people in the world who are actually good people, for that matter. Okay, that's the truth of the matter. So to say all humans suck is simply false and is simply incorrect and untrue. Because even if the majority of people suck, which I know is a popular term, especially in intellectual circles, the masses ruin everything, yada yada yada. You've heard it a million freaking times. Oh, the masses, the majority of people ruin fucking everything. The simple truth of the matter is that's actually, even if it is true, it doesn't mean everybody in the world ruins everything for that matter. There's a lot of people out there who do not ruin things, who do not cause problems, who do not screw things up, you know, and actually have ideas that can actually change the world and make the world a better place in one way or another, whether politically, technologically, or even just straight up socially. There's a lot of people in the world who actually like do not screw things up. So to say everybody in the world sucks is a really toxic and bad way of thinking. And actually, something I just want to add to that, especially which I believe I could give a unique perspective on it, because I was one of the first people to hear that term, especially when it became popular in the, you know, in the early to mid 2000s, which became popularized from everything from, from shows like nature channel shows, about animals and stuff, to Full Metal Alchemist, let alone a lot of anime shows, but specifically Full Metal Alchemist, and of course that popular show, that was popular in that time period, which was called The World Without Us. Like how the world would be like without human beings, for that matter. Which was very popular at the time. Around like 2007, 2008, how nature would recover without human beings being involved in screwing everything's up, or at least according to the show. So I could definitely give a very unique perspective. And one thing I could definitely tell you about that way of thinking. You know, humans suck, which became popularized at the time, which was becoming more popular at the time, and was actually around people who at least kind of know what they're talking about. Versus now everybody's saying it, so now it's become gentrified and and annoying now. But yeah, like I was saying, when it comes to the perspective of someone who actually was around at the time, I can tell you one thing, okay? From my perspective, from what I know when I was around at that time, okay, is that the first thing I want to mention is that first and foremost, you need to understand, okay, that is not a good way of thinking, okay? That is a very toxic way of thinking, okay? Thinking in that type of way is one of the ways of thinking that will make you one of the most miserable people you can imagine in your life, for that matter, okay? Most of the most miserable people, specifically intelligent people who are already kind of predisposed to be miserable because it's considered uncool to be intelligent, the ones who embrace that philosophy are some of the most miserable people you can imagine your life and literally beyond. They are miserable because, as we all know, humans are everywhere, okay? Humans are on every continent and so on and so forth, and it'd be very hard to wipe us out for that matter, because believe it or not, we are a very intelligent, resilient species. Okay? So the truth of the matter is, thinking in a type of way like that is not a good way of thinking. It can really screw you up for that matter. Because it's not like we're ever going to go away anywhere. Even if we had a massive population decline, there's still going to be humans around. There's so many of us, and we have the ability to adapt to every environment. So what makes you think we're ever truly going to go away? So that's a very miserable way of thinking, which is definitely not something you should think, okay? For that matter, okay? Not to mention, to add to that way of thinking, if you really think of that way, why do you waste your time thinking about other people? If you think humans suck, why don't you just focus on your own life? Why do you spend your time thinking about other people and this and that? That's kind of dumb. And not even, well, it's not necessarily dumb, but it's not a good way, but it's definitely not the greatest way of thinking. Why don't I just think about something else? But they don't think about something else, and that's why they're so miserable. And that's what I'm trying to say here. This is why I'm trying to rescue people, because I don't want people to go down roads you don't want to go down. Okay, so that's one thing I can definitely say from my perspective of what I know happened to a lot of people because I was around at that time. Okay. Secondly, the other thing to also mention, aside from that point, to add to that point about the problem with that way of thinking that humans suck in general, is that you also have to realize that the world has changed a lot since then. Okay. And the perspective of a lot of people who popularize that term humans suck doesn't really relate to today's world, because a lot of that way of thinking is outdated, okay? Because a lot of those people who had that way of thinking, to be honest, were people who had a lot of problems with people who were bullied in school, and so on and so forth. So their perspective on the world, of course, is very different, than how maybe someone you might even react today, especially in a time period where, like, you had to go to school. You didn't have the ability to just take time off school by working on a computer at home. So we have to realize a lot of their way of thinking, to sum up what I'm trying to explain, is outdated. Besides, you also have to realize you cannot judge everybody in the world based on experience you had at your local school. Like, if you've been in one school or enough schools, as if you ask anyone who's been in enough schools, you will realize that sometimes how people respond to you at one place is different than another place. Some schools you go to by day one are just like, fuck, I hate this kid. Some schools you go to, they're actually really nice in the beginning, to the point it actually might even become a bit creepy. And some schools you go to, it's in the middle. People don't really care. They're indifferent to you. And that's what I'm trying to say. You cannot base your experience off of a small percentage of people you met with in school. That one school. Like, even if it's a huge school of like 1,000 people, that's not the whole world population. But at the time, a lot of people didn't know that. But we know that now. So we have to realize that way of thinking is outdated. It does not reflect how we should see the world today. That way of thinking is outdated, and it's not really relevant to today's world. So that's what I have to say about that. And now, since I've done talking about my first main point, the second main point to add to this is to add to that as a whole, which is very, very, very true, is that it also comes down to the fact that there ha- there hasn't been any definitive way to kind of come up with rules and ideas to make sure humans do not screw everything up. Because when you look at the history of the world, Okay, and not just history world, just in general, there hasn't been a definitive rule when it comes to code of conduct. Like how to behave. Like for example, do not cough in your arm, and sneeze in your arm versus sneezing in your hand and cough in your hand. To how the world should be run and all that type of stuff. Like politically, some people care more about the environment, but they don't care about money. The economics. Some people care about the economics, but don't care about the environment. There hasn't been a definitive main way to teach people to see the world to prevent people from screwing things up. But people can change. So what I'm trying to say here is that if we give the right information, then I don't think humans are going to screw things up for any category you can imagine. So in short, that way of thinking is very flawed. It's very outdated, and will just make you miserable for no reason. So in short, I do not believe humans suck. I just believe we just simply need to give better information out there. And through giving better information, we will solve the issue. And that's